Hey everyone, welcome back to Make It Happen Mondays, where we talk about sales, business, entrepreneurship, personal growth, mental health, and everything in between with guests who I truly respect and I think make a positive impact on the world around us. And talking about making a positive impact, man, John Vagueiro is one of those people doing the work. John is the CEO and founder of Adapting Social, a full-service digital marketing agency whose main mission is to validate small businesses' credibility online and build revenue. But that is not what we talked about. In this episode, we dove deep into optimism and gratitude, which I think you all know we need a lot more of right now, and it's hard to come by. I mean, his story is incredible. At a very young age, he was the oldest of a bunch of kids, and his dad came to him and basically was going to lose the house, and he had to go to work. And not just work, like he was working at Best Buy and not making enough money, though, to save the house, so he ended up deciding to go off on his own and start his own agency at such a young age. And he said he spent 3 months knocking on doors and getting people slamming doors in his face and got that one yes that changed everything. And so we dove into where his optimism comes from, and he talked about it in form of anxiety, which I thought was really interesting. He said his optimism actually comes from his anxiety and a lot of his mental health issues, because he had to force himself to be positive in a lot of ways, and how he was a people pleaser and how that's not a good thing. And he talked about toxic positivity, which I actually come across a lot with some of my friends and people I know who are always, oh no, it's all great, when you know it's not. So we dove into that and why sadness is actually a good thing and how to deal with it. And then he gave some very tactical things about his calendar strategy and how he deals with disappointment and depression, and also his existential gratitude, which I thought was really cool. So like you always hear me at the end of all my podcasts, go out there and make somebody smile today. Man, this is one of those episodes that I think more than a few people need to listen to. So I hope you enjoyed it as much as I do. Let's make it happen. John, welcome to the Make It Happen Monday podcast, my friend. Thanks for coming on board.
John, you have a fantastic name. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, I love it. And I'm looking forward to this conversation for a couple of different reasons. I think when I started doing some background, I mean, the optimism side of what we're looking at here, I think is optimism is I've always kind of considered myself an optimist, right? But there's a lot of stuff going on right now that is making it hard to be an optimist, just from a business standpoint, a macroeconomic standpoint. So I'd love to dive into that with you as far as learning, some of the stuff that you talk about true optimism versus toxic positivity and those type of things. But let's give the audience a little background of where you're coming from and kind of why you're doing what you're doing right now.
Yeah, man. So why I'm doing so initially, I got into the world of being an entrepreneur and started my first company, which was Adapting Social, my agency, which is my main business. It's my baby. It's the thing I started from scratch when I was 17. My parents came to me, I'm the oldest of 5. My dad approached me and was like, listen, I'm in a tough financial position. We potentially could lose the house. Right. And I'm like, oh shit, like what can I do? Right. Yeah. And, at the time I was helping him. I was working at Ruby Tuesdays, like busing, and I was a lifeguard at the beach. And I was also working at Best Buy, doing a couple of different jobs. I always kept myself busy, but I was giving him money from those things to help, and it just wasn't enough based on what his situation. So He told me nothing is safe. And so I started Googling at the time, like, what can I do to make like 50, 60 grand a year? This is going back like 15 years. Yeah. What can I do to make that? Because I don't know. I didn't know where I got the number. Just like Googling it. And I found a couple of things that I couldn't do, right? So one was an air traffic controller, right? You had to at least be somebody who wanted to do that. And then a couple other things, but one thing that stuck out to me was website freelancer, right? So I saw website freelancer and I was like, oh, that's interesting. And so I started like looking things up on how to build websites and stuff. And I stumbled upon a couple of different platforms. And so I taught myself how to build sites. And so I started building out websites. And my first version of it was, remember Living Social or Groupon?
Yeah.
So at the time, this is before Groupon was on the scene though, it was just Living Social. Okay. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, all right, I'm going to make a rival website on a really more micro level. And essentially what I built out was called bricktowndeals.com. So it was just for my town that I grew up in Brick. And so instead of me, do you know the model and how it works, John?
No.
So essentially Groupon, let's just use an easy example. Let's just say,
we'll explain it, but I think, the Groupon model.
So as an example, right? So let's just say you sell mason jars, right? You sell mason jars for $10. If you put it on Groupon, what they do is they say, okay, we're going to sell it for $5 now, right? And I'm going to take $2.50 and you're going to take $2.50. And initially the thought process behind this is like, okay, I'm going to get new customers. They'll try my mason jars. And if they like them, they'll come back and pay full price.
Right.
What we started to see with Living Social, and why we don't really hear about Living Social anymore, is that literally, they would almost bleed companies dry, right? Because, you have to have money to pay for inventory, pay for employees. And when you have those deep discounts, yes, you're getting the volume, hundreds of thousands of people in your door, but you're not making money. Right. So my goal was to rival it. And so I did. And so essentially what I put together was where you just pay me a small fee. It was like $50 a month. And you put as many deals as you want with it. So we built that up. I went door to door for almost like 3 months in the winter here in Jersey, which is not Boston winters, by the way. We could say for sure. But it is damn cold though. And I was door knocking. And again, just picture like I'm a 17-year-old kid, have a suit that doesn't really quite fit me all the way. It's like the suit came up to here. It was like from a Sweet 16 or something from like a year or two before. And I was going knocking on pizzerias, knocking on doctors, knocking on everybody I could. And eventually, after 3 months of doing that, I got one person who gave me a yes. And so this person said yes. And after 3 months of knocking, I was like, holy shit, this is worth it. And, and I was trying to get them on my Bricktown Deals website. And he said to me, well, do you also build websites for companies? And I was like, his name was Jason, he's still a client. I was like, Jay, I honestly, I've never charged anybody to do this. So I was like, I wouldn't even know what to charge you, but I could build you one. And he's like, well, I paid $1,000, for my last one. If you could do it for like $500-$600, it's yours. And I was like, going from, you want to charge that $50 to $500. I'm like, I'll take it. I was like, let's do it. Yep. So I continued to build out Bricktown Deals. We got a couple of people on there. And then I realized that it's going to more lucrative to be like building the websites, managing them, doing SEO and stuff. And then we fast forward, the overarching goal was I wanted to help my family. So I helped my family out of that financial situation. They did not lose the house. And then I found myself, about to be graduating high school saying like, what do I want to do? Right. Because in the school systems, I always, when I was in second grade, they held me back. And that's why I had a learning disability. So from second grade on, I was in classrooms, they call it in the East Coast. I don't know if it's all around the US that they do this in schools, but I was in what they called a classified class. So in the classroom with me, there was a teacher's aide on top of a normal class with a normal teacher in the front. But the aide came around to me, a couple of people like, do you know what's going on here? Do you need help? Like, do you need extra whatever? So it was like that extra love. So when I was getting out of high school, like I was like not knowing what to do, but I was already ambitious enough to say like, damn, like, I'm already making some decent money here. So I don't think I'm going to go to college. And I wanted to go to a county college for like half of the semester. And I wanted to say, this is not for me anymore. I don't want to do this. But the core thing here is that it was my family in a desperation situation that put me in it, that made me say, I need to go figure something out. And then when I figured it out, the one thing that kept me like bolted and anchored to this industry is that growing up, I'm sure my parents in this, like I've had, anxiety disorder for a long time in my life, again, learning disabilities, the school system and all this other stuff. And then also my family at times, they were on food stamps, we had a lot of financial troubles. So I didn't have like mentors around me that helped me say like, John, here's what you should do. Here's the next thing. So this financial situation my dad brought to me at the time sucked. And I hated every second of it, but it actually was a big thing. And I think the biggest thing that I learned from it, now just bringing it full circle to this, is that, when I first started the company out of desperation, and now we're today, there's one thing that kept me. And it's, I'm obsessed with entrepreneurs. And when all the business owners, when I was young and, anxious and knocking on doors and doing whatever I'm trying to do, I'm meeting these people who have fucked up stories like I did, right? My family, my parents, my dad had, some alcoholism, and so, growing up, I've heard these crazy, similar stories that I went through, that these people have experienced too. And now they have a company of 200 employees, and they have an elementary school or middle school education, and they're doing what they're doing. Like I was like, wow, this is possible. And there's people out there like me, so I'm not the only fucked up person in the world going through this shit. So anyway, that's what kept me anchored to it. And since that, we scaled that to social network in 20 countries. I have a couple other companies that I own as well, in addition to it, in liquor space and other spaces like that. But, it all started from, that desperation. And I always like to give the example of like, when you look at athletes, right? Like, some baseballs behind you and stuff. When you look at most of the world's top athletes, right? Whether it's Jordan, LeBron James, whatever, most of these people, they came from rough upbringings, right? Mm-hmm. And their goal was to get their parents and their families out of it. And they didn't want to be in it. Mm-hmm. And I feel like I had a similar vibe, because a lot of times you get asked like, well, why didn't you give up? Right. And to me, it was never an option. It's stay here, have financial, difficulties and all that was going on, or I had to move out of it. And I wasn't choosing it. And I think a lot of times you see that in a lot of the core characteristics of entrepreneurs is that they have that tough upbringing. But John, also, I'm a rambler. So if you need to shut me up, John, just tell me to shut up.
No, this is great. No, I think that, look, first of all, the journey is always what I find most intriguing, right? And the learning, like everybody always talks about the outcome, right? Versus what it took to get that outcome. And to me, that's where the learning is. That's where, you figure things out and you fail a lot, right? To figure it out along the way. And I'm curious with all that, I think there is something to be obviously about just, I didn't have a choice here, right?
Agreed.
But also, and related to sales, if we go back to your cold calling experience with, 3 months and knocking on every door and you didn't get one yes, right? Yeah. I mean, most people would give up after that, right? So in addition to the entrepreneur and the passion for it and just and also I have to do this whether I like it or not, there had to be a little bit of optimism in you in the beginning to say, I'm just going to keep going. It's eventually going to work out, right? Because there's the part I have to do this, so I don't have a choice. But there also had to be that part of like, all right, if I believe that if I work this hard, I believe that if I do this stuff, that it is going to work out. So where did optimism start to creep into your mentality? Like, where did it consciously hit you?
To be honest, John, I think it came from the anxiety stuff, right? Because growing up, my mom said I was really young, I was shy. And then as I got a little bit older, I started, building my personality and and I was like the friend when I was younger, like in elementary to middle school, that like, I always, like I had a core friend group, but I always wanted to be bringing new friends. I wanted to meet new people, I had my friends and stuff. And I always enjoyed and love, right? I love connecting with people and stuff like that. And I think when I look back, a lot of times people always were like, you're always so happy, you're always this, that, whatever. And I think it came from the anxiety. Because a lot of times for people out there who are experiencing, anxiety or constant anxiety, so those anxiety disorder, you have to force yourself to think positive. And there's something really beautiful about it, right? A lot of times with anxiety or mental health challenges, we feel fearful, fight or flight, right? And the thing is it's our natural instinct to eventually get depressed, because it's like, why am I constantly feeling this way? What's going on? What the heck? Why do I need to rely on this to feel better? And I'm a very holistic person because of my mother. My mother was like the kind of person where, like, you can just that, like, if she has a headache, she's not going to take Advil, she'll just drink a shit ton of water and be like, I'll figure it out, right? So that's how I grew up. And so I'm not somebody who's like, I'm going to go grab medication. So for me, my self-medication holistically was like just constantly being positive, right? And like figuring out like, I'm not feeling great, but you know what? I'm here, I'm alive. And I was always trying to pull on to these things to make it more tangible. I'm okay. Like, it's going to be okay. You're fine. And then I think that turned on to a life liquid selling, to be honest. And from that point forward, it made me realize that's the one thing I love. If you're able to, I'm not going to say conquer, but if you're able to get into a harmonious place with your mental health, one of the most beautiful things is when you realize that, especially if you're doing this, like, it's a struggle. It's a real struggle, right? And when you can put yourself into a better place and you realize that you're capable of doing it, it's not easy. And you have to beat your subconscious mind from trying to protect you, making you anxious, making the adrenaline flow, or if you're depressed, your dopamine's not hitting. You have to convince yourself, and you get to convince the automatic part of your brain, your subconscious, that I'm okay, right? And so I think the optimism for me, and everybody that works with me at any of the companies or any of my friends and family, they all know me as an extreme optimist, right?
Yeah.
And you brought up in the beginning the toxic optimism.
That's what different, right?
There is, because when I first was early in building my team, when we were small, I had like 15, like 10 to 15 people on team, maybe less. I was the dude, no matter what was going on in the day, I would ask everybody in the whole company. We'd sit there at the end. Now, this is before remote work. So I'm sitting there and I'd be like, we'd be in the conference room with the guy, everybody rate your day on a scale of 1 to 10, right? And for well over 7 years, every day, I was like 10. And people would feel, what I realized is that people on my team would feel like, well, how can he have a 10 every day? Like, is he being honest? Like, come on. And it would make them feel like they couldn't say less than a 10 or a 9 or an 8, because then they would feel like I'd be like, well, what's wrong with you? It's up to you to do that. Like, so I was that guy for a long time. And then as I got older, I started to understand that was the people pleaser, right? I'm a big people pleaser. I call myself a recovering people pleaser because ultimately, right? I want people to be happy. I want people to like me. I'm also an empath. So like, I sense energy. So like, if somebody's not excited or giddy, I would always try to counter motivation, get them hyped up. But I realized as I scaled T that when you're a people pleaser, and for anybody who owns a business or is in charge of a team here, it actually puts you in a terrible position, because when you're a people pleaser and you constantly just want to be liked, it's not effective, right? And when your team's constantly not doing the right job and you're just being nice, guess what? They're going to keep repeating the same actions and behaviors because they're not getting heals, right? And then you're still a happy person. So what it wound up doing for me was realizing that you have to earn respect through getting results, not through being liked because you're a nice person. And so I think, just going back to the optimism situation, I was just always overly optimistic because I know what I'm capable of, and I push that on other people sometimes. But as I got older and more mature and seasoned in business, I realized that, you know what, it's okay to not always be, I don't want to say not optimistic, and not always be cheery in a situation that is not favorable or going your way. But I think what I learned personally from me was that I said to myself, I know that I should be optimistic because I'm also like religious. I'm a Catholic, and I believe that God has a plan for me, and I believe in a higher power. So I know when I'm going through difficulties, I'm optimistic because thus far in my life, I'm just what I see out of life in my 31 years on this planet, I've seen that tough situations typically build the man.
Absolutely.
And so I like that now. And I'm sucked up in the head about that because people are like, well, you're supposed to be pissed off here. You're supposed to be sad here. You're supposed to be mad here. Yep. And I will be those things. And I will feel those emotions now. Where in the past, it's faking, not those things. I think what made me a better leader, a better husband, a better friend is I'm now a lot more realistic with, well, I'm fucking pissed about this, but I'm not going to stay there.
Right.
I won't stay there. So
that's kind of the one thing, because I know, look, I got a bunch of friends who, thankfully for me, I've never experienced mental health issues, thankfully.
Yeah, good.
But I'm around a lot of people and friends who have, and there's a lot of people who I think mask that depression, mask that anxiety with what you call toxic positivity.
Right.
But it's always oh no, things are great, right? And it's like, when things aren't great, you know what I mean?
Right.
And it's kind of like you actually lose credibility in a lot of ways, because now all your positivity is like kind of your 10 out of 10 all the time. It's like nobody can be 10 out of 10 all the fucking time.
Right.
So I'm going to take a slightly different track than I was going to go with this, but I'm curious, how do you approach somebody like that? How do you, so say you're the 10 out of 10 guy that's, no, everything's great, right? And you're sitting there and you're at a company or whatever it is, or you're just their friends.
Right.
And you know that things aren't great, but at the deep rooted level, there's real reasons why things aren't great. So it's fucking heavy, and they probably don't want to address it because of the challenges that they're going through. How can you be a friend to that type of person?
I think if I were to go back, if you were to come to me, we knew each other, just us two John squared, right?
Yep.
And you go up to me and you're like, listen, I know we lost that big client, and I know you're being positive about it, or I know that person quit on team and you're trying to be positive about it. But I just want you to know that you don't have to pretend to be strong for me, because I want to take that weight with you.
Okay.
Now, I would like to think I'm thinking of my current consciousness and my current space versus mine then, my mentality then. Yeah. And dude, I was like jacked up on like Steve Jobs, Tony Robbins, like all this stuff since I was a kid. Yeah. So I always put those blinders out for those things. So I would think if you were to approach me at that certain juncture, I would probably say to you, well, John, I'm not pretending. I'm totally fine, right? I would think that I would probably mask it still, right? But there's a lot of ego tied to it. My ego is different. Yeah. But I would say because there's some times that I'm sure, like, I'm an alpha male. So there's a lot of times where if that type of situation pops up now, my ego is a lot less, because I think the levels of success that I've wanted to achieve in this world, I've gotten to most of them. And because they're family related, right? Yeah. It's not monetary for me. For me, it's like, I found my dream woman, almost 9 years ago. She's my wife. We have a child, and I have my dream child. Anything I could ever want in the world, like, is right there. And then also I have my family. So, I retired my mom, right? So like, there are things like that like my ego, I'm not attached to it anymore, right? Because like whatever I had to do to get to where I am, it helped me do that, right? So now being open to feedback, and I think that's the biggest thing that shifted for me. So here's the thing. The people who are that 10 out of 10 guy, right, that I used to be, they're so egocentric, and they're not trying to do it because they want to be better, right? At least that was my mentality. It was because I wanted to always be strong for the people around me, and my ego was attached to being the strong guy, right? So I think
because that's what I worry for, right?
Yeah.
Quite a bit, because you hear the stories of like Robin Williams.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Or Chris Farley, right? I mean, they were always wanted, and you said it this. I'm not as people pleaser as you explained, but I'm definitely a people pleaser. I'm the one that's at the we my wife and I host a lot of parties, and I'm always, hey, you having a good time? Like, you having a good time? I always want to make sure you're having a good time. If you're not having a good time, I'm going to hyper focus on you, figure out what the problem is, and see how you right. But I'm not. I wouldn't consider it toxic. Whereas I have other friends who are like if you're not having a good time, if you're not happy, they over-index it, but it's to hide their deep-seated issues. I mean, I don't think anybody was overly surprised when Chris Farley died, right? But no. I think when because you knew his drug use and all that, but I think it hit a lot of people when Robin Williams died. At least it hit me, right? Because I looked at him as such an incredible soul, such a good person, and funny all the time, and seemed to. I mean, he had his problems. He did his drugs too, right? But like when all of a sudden it was uncovered of how deep his depression went, how deep it went, you were like, oh my God. So for a lot of people, we don't, I want to say take advantage of, but we don't recognize that toxic positivity that is hiding something. And I'm just trying to figure out, is there a way to help or identify that it's real positivity and optimism versus toxic positivity, because they're trying to help everybody else so that they don't focus on themselves?
It's such a great question. And I have a rule of thumb that I utilize now for myself as my North Star. So as an example, if I'm going through some shit at work, right? And I'm like, damn, I'm upset about this, right? What I used to do was, it's okay, it doesn't matter. Like, I'm going to figure it out, right? I think the one thing I heard, and I heard this at a Tony Robbins interview for almost 10 years ago, right? And I play this back in my head every time I find myself in that position. And they asked him, like, you're Tony Robbins. You're the world's guru on personal development. Do you ever just sit on the couch with a bag of Cheetos, pissed off, drinking a Diet Coke or something? And he was like, he started laughing. He's like, listen, he goes, do I get mad? Am I human? Yes. But he's like, I choose not to state it, right? So for me, my new, like, it's almost like a filtration system, right? I want to be like a pool filtration system where you get all the toxic chemicals out, you get all the shit out and filter it so you don't have bugs all over your pool. For me, it's, okay, I'm going to acknowledge this feeling, this emotion. right? I'm going to put acknowledgement to it because it's real and I'm feeling that. But here's where positive optimism comes into play, because you're like, here's the cards I'm currently dealt, and I'm not happy. I don't want to be here. I don't want to be in this position. But I'm pissed off. I'm giving myself the space. I want to give myself the space and the time to process these emotions, right? My wife actually said this very well a few years back when we first got, I think we were just engaged, and this is when I was toxically positive. And she was upset about something, and I'm just hitting her with everything, right? Hit her at it, right? And she goes, "Can you just let me be upset?"
Yeah.
Right? And I remember thinking that, like, why would you want to be upset, right? But you know what? You need to process emotions. And I think that's where toxic positivity comes in, when you don't allow yourself to process.
Yeah.
And so that is my new filtration system. I process the emotion. I don't pretend that it's not there, but I allow myself the space and time to process. And then I say, all right, well, I'm not going to stay here. I'm moving on, right? So that is my new rule of thumb: to filter it in, process it, understand it, and then move past it.
So there's a couple of examples that I love, and I want to get into your calendar strategy here for a minute. But you ever seen the movie In and Out? Inside Out. It was the cartoon.
Oh,
movie,
yes.
Right. So the reason I love that movie was because sadness. Remember Happy was always trying to get rid of sadness. Like, leave, no, sadness. No, it's always happy. It's always happy. Yeah. And then at the end, it was, well, the reason you are happy is because you can be sad. Right. In that sadness allows for the happiness, and you have to process that emotion.
I just got the chills, by the way. Podcast update. I just got the chills on that one.
But it's right. I mean, that's what that movie was all about ultimately. And there's another one that I learned from my mentor Jeff Hoffman, where, because sometimes I feel bad because I judge when I don't want to. I hate judging people, but I do. You know what I mean? Like, it is like, oh, you said, you look, and even like superficial shit. Sometimes you look a certain way, whatever it is. We all have that in us, and I always feel guilt for judging, and I don't want to judge people, but I do, and so I would beat myself up about it. My mentor Jeff, he said, John, he's like, because he goes to a lot of therapy, and he goes, look, I have, it's almost like this little Buddha elephant. And he's like, his therapist labeled that as his judgment elephant. He's like, look, we all have it in us. Okay. And he's like, and look, sometimes we have to take the judgment elephant out and let it be it. Let it judge, but realize that that's not us. And so we're going to put it back in its place, and we're going to go about our day. But every once in a while, we got to take the little judgment elephant out. So he almost objectified it. He's like, this is a thing. It's like a little pet. It's a little pain in the ass pet that I don't like, but it's my pet, and I got to let it breathe every once in a while, but I'm going to put it back in its box because it's not going to control me. And I think it's the same thing with sadness and processing it. It's like when people die and they don't process, that emotion of that lost loved one, and that, no, I'm good. I'm just going to bury myself in work. That's like the Catholic guilt thing that just ends up eventually coming out and ruining in all the wrong ways, health-wise, reaction-wise, that type of stuff. Because if you don't deal with it early and as you need to, it's there whether you like it or not, right?
Right. So John, I just want to say, what a beautiful reference. I'm really happy you brought that up. And for your listeners, I think one of the things that I just want to say, I have a lot of international clients, and a lot of times, the first time this happened to me was a couple years back, but I remember I was on this board meeting virtual call with a client, and around the country, and I remember at the end of it, one of the guys on the team, one of their executives pulled me aside, on a sidebar chat, and was like, why are you like being so like positive and happy all the time? Like, can you be serious? And I remember him thinking like, this is like, he literally said, he goes, you Americans think you're always supposed to be happy. And what you just said there, like, resonated with me about like, hey, always trying to get rid of sadness in the movie Inside Out. So there's a show called The Marvelous Miss Maisel.
Oh yeah, my wife's one of my favorite shows. She loves it.
Mine too, right? So I only typically watch it through my wife. Yeah. But there's one scene in the whole show that cracked me up. Where have you actually saw some of the episodes?
Yeah.
Okay. So there's a scene where Maisel's father, right, finds out that his grandson is a part of this happy tribe in the school system.
Yeah, I saw this one.
He's not academically inclined. So he's in the happy group, whatever. And so he goes back to the table, and now his whole family's there. It's his son, his wife, both kids and stuff. And he goes, do you know that your son's in that happy group? And, and the guy's like, what do you mean? What's wrong with that? He goes, because, and then his son goes, Pop, we'll have plenty of time to become miserable. And he goes, nobody who's ever accomplished something worthy of life was truly happy, right? And I think there's a lot of truth to that. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of interesting thoughts around, right? Because when you look at Steve Jobs, right, people looked at him like a miserable fuck. And a lot of people did not like to work with him. If you respect building businesses and you respect design integrity and just, operational success, you look at that guy like a god. But the people around him who knew him were genuinely like, this guy is miserable. Like, we don't like it. Anyway, my whole point though is that in most countries outside of the US, they don't like sadness, being depressed, being anxious, doing all these other things. It's normal. It's normalized because you're not supposed to always be happy. Anyway, I just wanted to say that bit though, because I think a lot of times people don't realize.
Yeah, and I think it's important to sit with it for a while and let it sit. I mean, my dad passed a couple of years back, and I kept myself busy taking care of my mom and my sister at the time, and then I had the chance to thankfully my wife had gotten us. This was right when COVID. This was actually 2021, and it was February, and we were in Aruba. And we had a beautiful place in Aruba for 2 months because we were going to be remote anyways. Might as well. And didn't want to be in fucking Boston in the winter, right? So we were there, and thankfully I had the ability to kind of sit with it for a while and do those long walks on the beach, sit at the end of the pier, have that conversation with myself and whoever was out there listening, and it allowed me to be sad. Right. And I think if I had just done what I had typically done, which is bury myself in work and just fuck it, I'm just going to get through this, and I'm fine, I'm good, right? Like no problem. Then I don't think I'd be in the same space that I am right now, right? So I think that's so. Talk to me a little bit about that calendar strategy though, because you talk about how look, pessimism creeps in to all of us, and it kind of chips away at some of the stuff. So. What's your strategy of this calendar strategy and how you look at this to kind of compartmentalize it?
I call that the it won't matter strategy, typically. Okay. But the calendar strategy works just right. So essentially, here's what I do. So when I'm going through some shit, whether it's work, personal, whatever else, I legitimately like in my like phone calendar, I put the specific date that this happened, and I put a note there, and I put a reminder, right, for a 30-day check. Okay. Good. And so every 30 days from the day that I had shit day or a shit week, where it was the starting of that shit week, I go back 30 days and I look at it and I ask myself, how much did that day matter? Or like, are you still going through this? And Johnny, it's like 95% of the time, it never really mattered, right? And that's why if you're somebody who find yourself being hypercritical of people, then you're probably in the same route. Most of us, we focus more on things that are not going well than the wins, right?
Oh,
because we're hypercritical, right? Yep. And I think I like to do that as a example so that I can start to build a part of my brain that's fortuitous enough to see that, okay, today I had this happen to me. This sucks. I don't know what I'm going to do here. I know I put it down on my calendar. It's going to remind me 30 days. I'm going to do what I got to do. And then I'm going to visit it back. How bad was it? Oh no, here was the solution. Yeah. So I started to do this, for probably the better half of like 2 years. And what it started to build in my mindset is to be better in those moments. Not being as hectic, not being as crazy or frantic. It's going to be okay. You figure this out again. 10,000 times now. Eventually in the future, when I get to 10,000 times, that happen in the calendar, I'll be able to say definitively, you figured it out. Don't worry, it's fine. It's part of life. And and there's something to say about that too, because we find ourselves thinking that we're not going to fix it and we're stuck. What the reality is.
And it's funny to say that because I was watching this round table with a bunch of movie stars or whatever, and they were talking about learning lessons, and Tom Hanks was like, hey, what's the one thing you wish you knew when you were younger, right? And
Right.
he said something that still sticks with me. He's like, this too shall pass.
No,
Like,
I think I saw that. I think I saw it. That was fire.
And everything, right? Like, this too shall pass. Like, no, like, and it's funny how, I do this to try to remind myself and remind the people, that I engage with, when I do my out of office, for instance.
Yeah.
So I just took a 2-week vacation, and every single time my out of office says the same thing. It says, hey, thanks for your email. Due to the fact that I'm not an emergency room doctor, I'm guessing your email can wait until I get back. So thanks for your email, and I'll get back to you when I get back to you. And inevitably, I get at least a half a dozen people emailing me back being like, dude, I needed that reminder. And that's probably one of the best out of offices I've ever got, right? Because it's just a check on, like, look, everything we do isn't that important ultimately at the end of the day. I mean,
so true, mate.
I mean, in your early, don't get me wrong, and there are some desperate times that you had to pay the bills for your family so you didn't lose the house, right? That is dire. That is, but this too shall pass. You know what I mean? Like, there'll be an option. You might lose the house, but something else is going to happen. And I don't know if you've ever read it, but I'm not a huge reader, but my favorite book by far at this point is Matthew McConaughey's Green Lights.
Have you read that? But I heard good things.
Oh, dude, you have to. Like, and actually, I'd listen to it as opposed to read it, because he's got the Matthew McConaughey voice, and he just
I want to hear that all day.
You have to, like,
all right.
Yeah. Well, and he actually tells the story of all right. Do you know that was the first line in his first movie ever?
I did not know that.
So, like, he didn't even know he wanted to be an actor. And as a sidebar, he didn't even know he wanted to be an actor, and he just kind of took this gig. And he was supposed to be this dude, and he didn't know how to play the dude. So he's like, how can I, whatever. And so the first line when he was trying out for it, he was like, all right. And then that was it. So the fact that, right? And that, to me, but the book Green Lights is all about, I used to say, and I think this is actually very insensitive these days, which is why I wish people wouldn't say it. And I wish I didn't say it in the past, which is, everything happens for a reason. Right. I think that's insanely insensitive, because, let's talk about the people who are getting bombed and their daughter just got killed because of a drone attack. Like, you tell me that person, like, that happened for a reason.
Can't true, yeah.
No, you tell me my dad died for a reason. Fuck you. I'm going to literally punch you right in the fucking eye.
Literally.
If you tell me my dad died for a reason, right? But I've shifted it to, I believe there's a silver lining. If you look hard enough, there's a silver lining in almost every situation, right? Which is what Green Lights is about. It's like, oh, holy shit, this thing happened, and this is horrible right now. But with what your approach, the calendar strategy, like, in a month later, you might look back and say, holy shit, that was the best thing that could ever happen to me. And that's, like, I have a bunch of examples. I wrote a blog post called, Stop Doing What You're Supposed to Do, right? Because there was 2 points in my life where I was going through the motions. I was doing what I was supposed to do, and somebody else made the decision for me. And I thought it was the worst thing. Like my first fiance, 7 years, I was engaged to her, and she broke it up with me, and I knew it was wrong, but I was doing what I was supposed to do. Like, what do you do after 7 years? You get married. Right. And she broke it off with me, and I was fucking devastated for like 2 days. Right. And then after like 2 days, I woke up and I was like, holy shit. Like, it was like literally the weight of the world got lifted off my shoulders. And then a year later, I met my wife and couldn't be happier and everything else. So that mentality of, this too shall pass, and that there's silver linings if you look hard enough, but you got to sit with it first. You got to manage that emotion so that you're not just pushing it and suppressing it with some toxic positivity. So
for sure. And the one thing I'll just say on that topic, though, the reason why I started to do that caliber thing was when I fully forgave my father for our troubled childhood shit.
Yep.
And I think one of the things for me, I was, again, talking about this reference yet, but we were sitting there and went to UPW, Unleash the Power, then Tony around. And long story short, he was just going through, people have some stuff that should happen. People who, they got raped by their uncles, their parents knew about it, and just crazy shit like that. Shit that you wouldn't even, you would think they wouldn't write movies that happen to people in real life. Which God bless them for getting through that stuff. But, there was this one lady who, that was a situation. She got raped by her uncle, her parents knew about it, whatever, like it was this whole big issue. And it's crazy to think that, right? So literally, but she's a super successful entrepreneur, but can't find happiness, right? So she has kids, whatever, she's severely depressed. suicidal thoughts, whatever. And where I was able to forgive my father from this note where we like to, as tough, he goes, if what did not happen to you, God, I would never want that there. I know you wouldn't either. He's like, but you wouldn't be you if it didn't happen to you. And that's really fucking devastating to say to you. But he said, you wouldn't be. And you have the successful people, you have people working for you that are living their lives, paying their colleges off, living in their homes, being in their careers. And not that you needed that from a perspective of, being, insensitive to what happened to you. But you wouldn't be you. So as much as that's challenging, you have to be grateful for your past, what happened to you. And that's hard to do. And that's why a lot of times people with depression, they can't come to terms that this happened to me. These were my cards. And so the calendar thing for me, when I heard that, right, my situation, my dad having an alcohol problem, whatever, other things, I looked at it and I said to myself, damn, he wasn't that person. If he didn't come to me and have that conversation, if I didn't have to step up when I was like early, to remember when I was like 11, 10, whatever it was years old, him being out at the bar and stuff, I had to step up as the man of the house. I was constantly like disciplining my brothers and my sister, or having to do those types of things to help my mom out. But if he wasn't who he was, I wouldn't be who I am.
Yeah.
And so that calendar thing came into play because when I came to peace, which I'm not going to lie to you, I still feel my body sometimes resentments that'll show up, right?
Yeah.
But it's like I've come to peace with the terms that like he had to be who he is. But again, I wanted to be XYZ person, wouldn't have helped, right? Like who he was helped me be who I am. So I came to terms with that, and I accepted it ultimately. And it made me realize, like, wow, if I were to look back at my past and do the Steve Jobs method, which is you can never connect the dots from forward. You can only connect them backwards. So my connecting of my dots are on a 30-day cycle where I say, okay, did this pan out? Oh yeah, it did. It worked out fine.
Yeah.
So that person quit. All right, did it work? Did it want to better? I actually want to better, right? Or maybe it didn't, but we figured it out. So anyway, that's the whole calendar strategy.
Love it, man. Let's finish up with gratitude. Because I think that has played a massive part in my life of getting me through, of just kind of reflecting and saying, what am I, even the small things, right? I remember I had a friend who was going through some tough times, and and everything was negative. Everything was negative all the time. And I asked her, I said, hey, do me a favor. And I don't even know where I picked this up from, but I gave her a suggestion. I was like, here's a notepad. I'm like, tomorrow, I want you to write down every positive thing that happens to you. And I mean everything, right? I mean, if somebody opens the door for you, write it down. If you make a green light on your way to work, write it down, right? If you get a text message from a friend who you hadn't heard from in a while, write it down. And I just want to talk to you at the end of the day, see how your day went, right? And she came back to me with like 4 pages of notes. And she was like, oh my God, I had the best day ever, John. Like, oh my God, this is incredible. Like everything seemed to be going right. I can't believe, our conversation yesterday was just so enlightening. And I was like, can I ask you, why do you think today was different than yesterday? I go, what was different today than it was yesterday? And she's like, I don't know. She's like, everything just seemed to be working out. I go, did it really? Or was it you just shifted what you were looking for? Because all you were looking for was negativity in the past, because I know it, because I talked to you a lot. And all I did was say, just start looking for the positive things and be conscious about it, right? And write them down. And that was kind of a light bulb for her. She was like, holy shit, you're right. She's like, I was actually looking for the positive things instead of looking for all the negative things. And I'm like, nothing changed between today and yesterday other than your view on things. And so that to me, gratitude, it helps me is realize that how fortunate I am to be where I am, how fortunate I am to have what I have, right? And so talk to me a little bit about how you cultivate, I think you call it existential gratitude.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to me a little bit about that and how it plays a role in your life.
Yeah. For me, I'm a big believer in I only want to, like, as I'm getting older, I just had my first child, me and my wife 7 months ago.
Yeah.
And, and it's, thank you. And it's changed a lot of my thinking, especially about people, right? Because like right now, you're somebody's child. I'm somebody's child, right? Like we're somebody's kids, and whether they're here or not. And I think the thing is I look at every day, the other day somebody said, dude, you're a self-made guy. And I've always said, and I've always loved that saying, I've always heard this. I've seen people do it and I've heard it. And I've always loved it. Nobody knew whatever. You did it yourself. But though, as of recently, I started to shift my thinking. I was like, you know what? Every day, because in the morning I have my morning rituals, routines, where I do my meditation, work out, and prayers, and I have a gratitude list, right? And whether I write it down or mentally put it every day, I think about it, and I think about the people who have helped me be who I am today, right? Where I've gotten to. And it's like an easy example, like my grandmother, Grandma Joan, was 83. She literally, like, when I first was like, had this idea, she was living at home with us, right, in our small little ranch house. I was packed in Chinese training, and she was super excited about it. Thought it was a great idea. She was my first bookkeeper. Like, she helped me she co-signed my first laptop at Best Buy, my first camera.
Nice.
And it's like, when you think about that, and I think gratitude for me stems from that, right? Like, even the bad stuff, like, so for me, that existential gratitude comes into play, where even thinking about the littlest things, and I love what you said about catching a green light, right? It's like, dude, everybody knows that feeling when you're in a rush and you catch that light. Yes, like, let's go. Like, literally. But it's like being grateful for those things. But for me, it's looking at everybody who helped me be who I am today. And I'll even change. So this year is going to be the first year. I'm turning 32 in September. And this year, for the first time, I'm trying something completely new. I'm going to be, instead of it being a party for me, right, I'm actually throwing a party for the people who made me, right? Because even though I was born on this day, right, it's not about me. It's about the people who make my life amazing. And that's what I want to shift my birthday from being about me to me celebrating everybody that matters, right? And also, potential thought for the listeners too, I'm also doing this for the first time. Only for my core people in my life, my immediate family, my best friends, my wife, people like that. I'm doing an anonymous survey monkey, right? With how I impact their lives and what I can be doing better. And so I'm going to get the poll from everybody around me and do that. Because I think part of gratitude, I think it's service, man. For me, gratitude comes with, like, why? Maybe it's just my mentality, but I want to serve. I want to serve. I want to serve my wife. I want to serve my son. I want to serve my parents, her parents, my family, my team, my friends, my siblings. Like, I want to serve people, right? And I think, that's the biggest thing that I think where gratitude comes from, because it's like when, I don't know if I'm sure you've been in this position where you thought picking up something for somebody at the store for like a holiday and you got it from, they weren't expecting it. And they were like, oh, it's so nice of you, Daddy, for doing that. And you just feel like, wow, that, it makes you feel good serving other people or helping other people. I think that's my gratitude list, man. As I sit there, I look at it, like all the things that I'm completely grateful for.
Love it, man. Yeah, I think that's one of the things that, and not to be, politics or anything, but I remember when Obama said, like, nobody's a self-made man, right? Yeah. And everybody fucking went bananas, like, fuck you, I did this. And it's like, no, you didn't. There was somebody who paved the road that allowed you to get to work. There was somebody who made the car that allowed you to get to, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, if you look at it at that fundamental level, none of us are self-made, not one. We've taken the initiative to do it, but without anyone, there's not a chance. I mean, think about it, customers, right? You're not self-made. Customers are helping you be you, right? They're paying your fucking bills. So totally. There's not one person out there that has been a self-made person 100%. So 100%. I think that realization and that ability to take a step back and be a little bit more humble about, where you got to and how you got there is a much easier path to, happiness ultimately, you know what I mean? Like, and realizing, cause I go back to Gary Vaynerchuk. He says it all the time. And I agree with this. You could be, you make 40 grand a year and you're happy, right? You win. Cause I know millionaires who are just miserable pricks, and I'd rather be happy than a miserable prick. And a lot of that comes from a service background of like wanting to see others be successful as part of yours. So awesome, John. Well, look, I love this conversation. I think we need to have it more out loud, quite frankly, for a lot of people, because there's just right now so much negativity out there. Everybody seems to be angry at something, and I wish everybody would actually just kind of take a step back and realize that, we're all pretty similar. You know, most of us have the same needs. We want to do the same. We just want to be good people. We want to serve our families, take a vacation every once in a while, and, you know, grab a beer every once in a while after work. So, right. So, appreciate it.
Are you a Sam Adams guy?
Yeah. Well, I went from being a Budweiser guy for a while, and then Budweiser tore my stomach up because they're rice driven, whatever, how they ferment their shit. And then I went to Sam Adams, and now I follow the seasons with Sam Adams. You know, so yeah, there's no.
You can't beat it. I love the Sam Adams commercial when they go, "Your friends from Boston."
Oh yeah, your cousin's from Boston. Yeah, that guy.
Your cousin.
He fucking nails it too. He's like, your cousin from Boston. And every commercial, I'm like, I know exactly a kid just like that who's gonna do that exact fucking thing, and he's gonna be the disaster at the wedding. But at the end of the day, you're gonna be fucking psyched that he's there because he's gonna be fun.
Yeah. Oh my god, I love it. I love that commercial. That literally makes my day right now. I see that.
Yeah. Awesome, John. Well, look, tell the audience here where they can find out more what you're doing with Adaptive Social and everything else that you got going on these days.
Yeah, man. So again, you know, Adaptive Social, we focus on two core things for businesses ranging from, you know, an individual, it could be like small business, like a real estate agent, to a smaller, you know, contracting business, up to Fortune 500 clients. Most of our clients come to us for two things: to build their revenue streams, and then secondly, building brand credibility in their marketplaces. So if those two things fit for you, you want to scale your business and scale your revenue, that's our focus point. You can find us at Adapting Social right here, literally on every platform. Yeah. So literally all channels, all platforms, even the new ones, Threads, and whatever else you come out in the future. And for me personally, you can find me on John Vagueiro, or Johnny NJHNY, on Instagram.
Love it, man. And then for those listening, I'll put it in the show notes, but last name Vagueiro. Check them out on social, LinkedIn, Instagram, and everything else. We'll put it all in the show notes. And John, it's been an absolute pleasure, man. I loved having this conversation. Thanks for coming on, man.
John, again, we started this way. We're going to end this way. Great name. Thanks for having me on, man. It's been an honor.
Absolutely. And for everybody out there, I think my outro on all my podcasts is going to resonate hopefully today more than most, which is go out there and make somebody smile today, because no matter how bad your day went or how bad you think it's going, you go out there and make somebody smile and you know you had a good day, and the world needs a lot more of that right now. So thank you all very much, and I will see you on the other side. I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. With your support and our incredible guests, we're one of the top sales podcasts out there right now, and I can't thank you enough. Now, to keep the momentum going, it would mean the world to me if you could go and leave a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform and share some of your favorite episodes with your network. Also, check out my new website at www.johnm.barrows.com, where you'll find even more ways to engage. There's a ton of free content, and you can also get trained from me directly as an individual or for your team. Look, I'm out there selling every day just like you are, and I'm doing my best to stay on top of all the latest trends in technology. So if you're looking to level up and you give a shit about this profession of sales, let's connect and let's make this happen together.